Good morning, friends. Welcome. I'm recording here like this because you know my family, and I'm not sure how well it would go if I just spoke with you while they're in the room on Sunday morning. Secondly, this gives me a chance to include maybe some clips about what I'm talking about. We'll see. Part of living in my family right now is that my capacity is a little less than it used to be, so hopefully we can get to that. I want to share briefly today about something I'm very passionate about. And for the next couple weeks, those who follow will do the same. We were talking at a worship committee meeting some months ago about how we see God. Now you heard my computer, that's funny. My bias for a long time has been that God is anywhere and everywhere. I think most of you will find that easy to agree with. But we need to find ways to see God wherever God might be, especially in places we don't normally look. I've been fascinated by activities for which people are passionate, especially activities beyond work, family, church, the normal stuff we have to do or choose to do, but maybe isn't the thing we would do if we were given a free hour. I mean, it gets real, right? Like, people spend real money, real time on very specific things. It could be golf, it could be sailboating, it could be fishing, like the list goes on, sewing, right? So where does that passion come from? What is fueling it, and is God anywhere in that mix? I've been passionate about many things throughout my life. Most have been lasting. Among those are singing, especially choral and vocal pursuits, a cappella, learning, teaching, biking, skiing, and community. Each of these have been somewhat insatiable, either ongoing or at least for a notable period. I'd like to focus on skiing in my life for this short discussion. Since I was a young boy, I love riding bikes, skiing, and for whatever reason, it was the speed that sort of captured my attention initially. It's hard to explain how it all felt at that time. In many ways, it felt similar to how it does now. Just this week, I left the office midday to clear my head and go for a mountain bike ride. As soon as I stepped away from my computer, my energy spiked. I was excited merely to change clothes. It's the same way when I'm headed out the door to ski or headed in the car to the ski resort. Burdens start to feel lifted, a childlike excitement sets in. And those trends increase when the skiing starts. Smiles, focus, maybe it's what they call flow. On more than one occasion, I have forgotten about phone calls and meetings due to this sense of flow. In fact, one time I took an important phone call standing on a steep slope in the middle of the woods on a powder day because I forgot about the call until my phone was ringing. That was a cold one. Now for a second confession. Skiing for me is not just a mythical, humbling, relationship-oriented way to be in the mountains during winter, as I may start to suggest in a minute. As I've thought about connections between skiing and reality for me, I should note that skiing sometimes acts a bit like a drug. And I think this relates to that speed thing I just mentioned. Something about going fast, experiencing thrill, maybe being on the border between life and death, or at least health and injury. It focuses my mind. Maybe we could call it Ritalin. Or maybe it's the stimulant of choice that makes things interesting, whatever it is. It works like that for me. So this long thread of skiing in my life started many years ago when I was age 5. Dad took me to the local ski hill called Spring Mount. Maybe some of you have heard of it. It's got about a 400-foot vertical drop, same as we have here at Bethany Birches. I had a lesson from a certified instructor. I mostly just remember weird feelings and sensations, sliding. It's a strange thing if you've never done it. And I remember being with my dad. I really liked that part. Like most memories from age 5, it's a little fuzzy. What comes into focus much more clearly were the family ski trips when I was young. As we were all learning to ski, trips were mostly to the nearby Pocono Mountains in Pennsylvania. And after that, as we got better as a family at skiing, trips were to Vermont. I don't think we stayed here at camp. My connection to skiing strengthened in high school when I got my license, and my friends and I would drive an hour after school every Wednesday night to ski under the light, something we don't do around here. Having new experiences with some of my best friends while doing a special activity etched skiing and snow and mountains into my life. The evolution continued throughout college, and when I decided to become a certified ski instructor, my skills skyrocketed. This made it all the more fun. In more recent years, I've noticed there's a connection between the amount of time given to skiing and the degree to which it feels like play. If you're a beginner or intermediate skier, you would probably say that skiing does not usually feel like playing. At times, it may feel more like a death sentence, or at least a grim reminder that going to the beach is easier and more comfortable. Then, of course, your mind wonders, why am I here? Why am I doing this? Am I going to break a leg? I don't know. Maybe that's not how it goes for you. It's how it went for me early on. This is one of many spiritual connections for me. It is the practice of skiing that allows it to become natural and knowable and enter that space of playing. It is the discipline applied to first learn the techniques and then to practice those techniques in the same way until they become second nature. I am often surprised that each time I practice certain movements to make my skis do what I want them to do, I learn a little bit more about how it works or how it might be different in different snow and conditions. Similarly, I think spiritual practices and disciplines allow us to gain understanding of how the world is and get to know the realities that undergird our experiences. The more practiced we are in prayer, devotion, service, other spiritual disciplines, meditation, reflection, the more easily we will be able to understand our behavior, influences, and how we currently behave or would like to behave. One of my ski teachers, told me that I would not be an expert skier until I could make a turn when I wanted, where I wanted, at any speed and in any condition. By that definition, I am still not an expert skier. Translating to spirituality in life, what if we could respond to any situation or any person with the tone, emotion, and degree of honesty that we wanted, regardless of the conditions, the context? Would we be expert livers or expert in relationship? Because of my practice and discipline in skiing, I've had the fortune of introducing my wife and children to the sport. I am hopeful we will create strong bonds as we do skiing together, and that it will be a connecting point for us to develop authenticity and relationships, of course, among other things. Going back to those high school years when skiing was grabbing hold of my imagination, I suffered 2 injuries. These were very humbling experiences for me. One accident happened when I was 16 and one when I was 18. Each injury happened because I overestimated my skills and experience. Each injury caused an ACL tear, one in the left knee, one in the right knee. The first time led to a new sense of humility. You all know 16-year-old boys or have known 16-year-old boys. Maybe, do we have any at church? Maybe one of you is a 16-year-old boy. The stench of the young white male ego is not very pleasant. Some of that stench was washed away for me while laying in a hospital bed after my first ACL surgery. God was so real to me and gracious to me during that time. I found God in nurses and doctors, my parents, and friends. I especially found God in what seemed like a mirror. I could now see a part of myself I had not noticed before. Then there was that stench. I became a new person through that experience. A young man who started to open to the possibility that in my current form, I was not yet who I was called to be. Those moments initiated a new journey that in many ways continues today. I believe that whether it is skiing or almost anything else, God is willing to use circumstances toward the goals of abundant life and transformation. I feel like I'm like squinting at you. It's kind of bright out. On this humility thread, other parts of skiing that have caused humility for me include the scale. I mean, go stand on top of a peak high in the Alps, or Rockies or Whites or Greens. It's easy to feel small and that the natural world is amazing and wonderful. Experience a strong gust of wind bringing with it sub-zero temperatures, blowing snow. Ah, I'm so glad for goggles. Or the sheer exhaustion of ascending thousands of vertical feet through deep snow, wanting to collapse for a minute. The mountain beneath my feet does not show any signs of collapse, and it has stood much longer than my short trip. I have had many moments in those wonderful mountains with family, close friends, and new friends. I've participated in a memorial service at the top of a mountain for a friend who died in a car accident just before he was to join us on a ski trip. One of my favorite things about skiing with friends and family is that typical barriers seem to be invisible or at least smaller. When we were spreading ashes, one of my friends said they don't know what to say, or how to pray, or how to acknowledge this moment. They asked me to pray, and I didn't really know what to do either. So we all sat around experiencing the moment and looking out at the natural wonders in front of us. It was beautiful to be sitting there together at 9,000 feet above sea level, feeling lost and directionless, and being free to admit that to each other. That freedom, for me, that's a piece, a thread in skiing. I keep feeling and finding freedom in multiple ways. To zoom back to now, as I listened to Gwen talk about Lent this year and the value of fasting or changing patterns as it relates to identity, I do have to admit that sometimes I wonder how much of my identity is held within skiing. This perhaps brings us full circle back to the question of where my passion comes from. How much of this passion for skiing is fueled by special memories? How much by that Ritalin-like quality of the experience? I suppose our passions are somewhat complicated. This part of my reflection is underdeveloped, in part, because it seems to depend on the year. Some years, like the year our son was born, passion for skiing, and especially ski gear, seemed to be fueled by a need to hold on to the past. Life was changing for me at a pace I was uncomfortable with. I probably tried to find ways to infuse stuff from the past into my current space so that it didn't feel so weird. Ask my wife her view on that strategy, and she may tell you it didn't make as much sense to her as it did to me. Other years like this one, 2019 to 20, which was not a good snow year, and which ski season ended early due to coronavirus, felt different. I really enjoyed seeing my daughter's progression, and the motivation for it all didn't feel very complicated. Interestingly, when skiing with my daughter, the go fast brain chemicals seem to be missing. Maybe that uncomplicates it a little bit. Just a young girl smiling, learning, and growing, glad to be with her father, much like I felt not quite 40 years ago. Similar to how when the sunlight gets shorter each fall and the wood fire starts burning, I get that same uncomplicated feeling, like when I was 5, like what I felt skiing with my daughter. I step outside in the evening just to smell the wood smoke and how it blends with the unique smells of late fall. It reminds me of what lies ahead and many past memories. Thankfulness marks those moments.